Hey, you've tuned into another deep dive, and today we're tackling something that might sound a bit, well, maybe a bit dry at first glance.
Yeah, paperwork maybe.
Exactly. We're talking about a new agreement between the U.S. and Ukraine, all about minerals. But trust me, this isn't about dusty rocks.
No, definitely not. This is really about uh the nuts and bolts of our modern world. Stuff that impacts the tech in your hand, national defense, all of it.
That's right. If you're trying to understand how things are shifting globally right now, this kind of agreement, well, it's a key piece of the puzzle, isn't it?
It really is. It shows how, needing resources and building alliances, how those things go hand in hand. It's actually quite fascinating.
So our goal today, our mission, is to unpack this U.S.-Ukraine minerals deal. We want to get to the heart of what it is, why it's a big deal.
And maybe uncover some surprising angles too.
Yeah. We've been digging through recent news reports, trying to pull out the essential info without getting, bogged down.
And importantly, we want you to walk away understanding why this matters to you. Because a minerals deal, it might not sound like an everyday thing.
Right.
But by the end of this, we think you'll see how connected it really is.
Okay, let's jump right in then. So the headlines announced this joint economic investment deal, U.S. and Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the initial buzz was understandably about supporting Ukraine,
Yeah.
with the ongoing conflict. But there's kind of a deeper layer here.
Oh, absolutely. This agreement is also significantly about the United States addressing its own need for these critical minerals.
Right. Critical minerals, what does that mean exactly?
These are basically resources vital for the economy, for national security, but their supply chains are vulnerable, often, concentrated in just a few places.
And that needs become more urgent because of China.
Exactly. With the trade tensions rising and China being such a dominant player in the global minerals market, it adds pressure.
Makes sense. Ukraine's economic development minister, Yulia Sviridenko, she described it as an equal partnership. What does that look like in practice? What's each side bringing?
Well, based on the reports, the U.S. side involves financial assistance, maybe potentially new military aid.
Okay.
And in return, Ukraine is offering half of the future royalties. But crucially, only from new licenses for things like oil, gas, and mineral extraction.
So it's about future potential, not current revenue stream.
Precisely. It's sharing potential future economic benefits.
Got it. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, the China connection you mentioned. The news specifically linked this deal to China restricting exports of some rare earth mineral.
That's right. It came after those restrictions, which were seen as retaliation for U.S. tariffs.
Okay, so for those of us who aren't geologists, rare earth minerals, what are they and why are they such a big deal?
Yeah, good question. So rare earths are a group of 17 metallic elements. Think scandium, yttrium, names like that. Now, despite the name rare, they aren't actually super rare in the ground. The tricky part is extracting and processing them. It's complex, it's expensive.
Like finding a needle in a haystack.
Kind of, yeah, and then needing a very specific way to get that needle out clean. But they're vital because of their unique properties, essential for loads of high-tech stuff.
Like what?
Everything from aerospace alloys, the bright colors and LED screens, even components and fuel cells for clean energy, really important.
And China's role here, you said they're dominant.
They really are. China is the world's biggest producer of rare earths by a long shot, and it doesn't stop there.
Oh.
They also have a really strong grip on other critical minerals. Think lithium, graphite, both absolutely essential for batteries, EVs, laptops, phones, everything.
Wow. So it's not just having the rocks, it's the whole process.
Exactly. They control a huge chunk of the processing ecosystem. That gives them significant economic leverage, strategic power. This deal with Ukraine, it's maybe a step towards building a bit of a counterweight.
Seems like a serious leverage point for them. I remember reading something. Didn't the U.S. once float the idea of buying Greenland for its minerals?
Yeah, that came up. But experts, like Heidi Kruber-Rediker at the Council on Foreign Relations, they point out some issues there.
Like what?
Well, Greenland has resources, yes, but developing them, that's a really long-term, hugely expensive project. Massive infrastructure needed, environmental challenges, melting ice,
Whereas Ukraine is different.
Potentially, yes. Even with the war, Ukraine already has a skilled workforce. They have what Kruber-Rediker called metallurgical know-how. The expertise is there.
So, in theory, it could be a faster, maybe more readily available source than starting from scratch somewhere like Greenland.
That seems to be the thinking, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so let's get specific. What exactly does this U.S.-Ukraine deal cover? Is it just those rare earths we talked about?
Actually, according to the details from the Ukrainian government, it's broader. It definitely includes minerals, and yes, rare earths are part of that mix.
But also,
But it also covers potential projects involving oil and natural gas.
okay, so quite wide-ranging.
Yeah,
But you mentioned earlier, it's important what it doesn't cover, too.
that's right. It specifically applies only to new American investments in these areas.
Not stuff already producing income for Ukraine.
Exactly. It doesn't touch resources currently being extracted. And officials were clear. Any profits from these new things, they aren't meant to, like, pay back previous U.S. support.
Right, this is about future development.
Future collaboration, yeah. Developing resources together.
The reports mentioned a list, was it 55 minerals initially?
Mm.
With maybe more added later.
Yep, that's the number mentioned. An initial list of 55, potentially expandable.
Were there any specific ones jumping out besides the rare earths?
Oh, definitely. Titanium is a big one, vital for aerospace.
Right.
Lithium, obviously, for batteries. That's huge. And even uranium for nuclear power.
Interesting.
Yeah. And it was noted that even former President Trump had apparently shown interest in Ukraine's rare earth potential back then.
So let's dig into Ukraine's reserves themselves. Reports suggest they hold, what, like 5% of the world's total? That sounds pretty significant.
It does sound like a lot, yeah. That figure, around 5% of global mineral reserves, including critical minerals and rare earths, comes from analysis by Capital Economics using Ukrainian geological survey data.
But there's a but, isn't there? A question mark over those numbers.
There is, yeah. Capital Economics also pointed out there's quite a bit of skepticism about how accurate those national estimates really are.
Why's that?
Apparently, a lot of the data relies on, and this is the quote, outdated Soviet-era assessments.
So potential is there, but the exact amount needs maybe more modern verification.
Exactly. We should probably take the precise figures with a grain of salt for now.
That makes sense. And it kind of lines up with the fact that current export revenues from Ukraine's critical minerals are pretty low, right? Less than $200 million a year.
Yeah, that suggests actually getting these things out of the ground and selling them isn't necessarily quick or easy right now.
So the economic viability in the short term might be limited for some reserves.
That's what the analysts suggest, yes. Near-term economic viability might be tricky for many of them. However,
Yes.
there are specific minerals where Ukraine does seem to have a stronger position, or at least recognize potential. Heidi Kriba-Redeker highlighted cobalt and nickel.
Which are important for.
High-performance batteries, think EVs again, other advanced tech, really crucial components.
And didn't you mention graphite earlier? Ukraine's position there seems relevant, especially with China dominating that market.
Absolutely. Ukraine is reportedly the fifth largest producer of graphite globally.
That's significant.
It is. And interestingly, they're also a notable producer of gallium, another one of those minerals China recently put export restrictions on.
So Ukraine already has production and resources in areas where the U.S. is actively looking for non-China options.
Precisely. That existing capacity is a key factor.
It still sounds like there's a lot of untapped potential, though, particularly with the rare earth elements themselves.
That's the general view, yeah. Reports suggest Ukraine's rare earth deposits haven't been heavily developed.
Why not?
A few reasons mention. Past government policies, maybe a lack of detailed info on deposit locations and quality, and of course the huge impact of the ongoing war.
Right. The war must complicate everything.
Immensely. Plus, the fact that reserves are scattered and studies might not be comprehensive enough yet.
But despite all those hurdles, the overall takeaway seems to be that Ukraine's natural resources, generally speaking, have significant commercial potential.
That's the consensus, yeah. And specifically, they're believed to have large reserves of titanium.
Aerospace, medical uses.
Right. And lithium. Batteries, ceramics, glass. Really versatile. And historically, the mineral sector was important for Ukraine. Over 6% of GDP, maybe 30% of exports back in 2021.
But there's that sobering point you have to mention, the impact of the Russian occupation.
Yeah, it's critical context. Estimates suggest something like 40% of Ukraine's metallic mineral resources are currently in occupied areas, inaccessible.
Wow, 40%.
Yeah. Which really highlights Ukraine's argument, doesn't it? That developing the remaining resources now is strategically vital for the U.S. before potentially even more fall out of reach. Adds a real urgency.
Definitely. Let's circle back quickly to China's strategy. Those export restrictions on rare earths we talked about, what does that signal more broadly?
Well, hitting those 7 heavy rare earths, including scandium and yttrium, it sent a clear message. It was explicitly linked to U.S. tariffs.
So, direct retaliation.
Seems so. And it's not the first time. Capital Economics noted that Beijing has a history of using these kinds of raw material export curbs to push back against Washington on trade or tech issues. It's a tool in their playbook.
So this U.S.-Ukraine deal, it really doesn't exist in a vacuum. It looks like a direct response, maybe part of a longer-term strategy.
Exactly. The analysis frames it that way. Developing alternative sources for critical minerals has been a growing priority. The aim is securing supply chains, making them less vulnerable to geopolitical shocks.
And less reliant on China and its allies.
Precisely, especially in these really crucial sectors. And remember, Heidi Krabo-Redeker's point about graphite China's near total control there makes Ukraine's position as a producer even more strategically interesting.
Okay, wow. So let's try and pull this together. Quick summary of what we've covered. This U.S.-Ukraine deal, it's clearly about more than just aid for Ukraine's defense.
Much more, yeah.
It's a strategic play to secure access to critical minerals, driven in large part by China's market dominance and their use of export controls.
Mm.
Ukraine has significant potential. We talked cobalt, nickel, graphite, titanium, lithium, rare earths. But there are real hurdles. Outdated data, the ongoing war.
Big challenges, definitely.
So ultimately, this looks like a move to diversify supply chains, reduce that dependency on China. Is that a fair summary?
I think that's a really clear and concise way to put it. It captures multiple layers, yeah. And why it's getting attention right now. Yeah.
Absolutely. So this agreement, it really does go beyond just a standard trade deal. It feels like it has bigger implications, right, for technology, national security, those global supply chains that, underpin everything.
It really does. And it makes you wonder which other countries might emerge as key players in this critical minerals landscape. Demand isn't going down.
No kidding.
And how might the specific U.S.-Ukraine deal change, as the geopolitical situation keeps evolving?
Those are really important questions to keep an eye on. If you found this deep dive valuable, if you want to unpack other crucial issues like this with us, definitely make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next exploration.
And maybe just one final thought to leave you with. Could this agreement signal something bigger, like a fundamental shift in how global resources are accessed, maybe even controlled in the 21st century?
That's definitely something to mull over. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.